Today's opening reading is an excerpt from a poem titled The Beauty of Death by Cahill Gibran. Take from me all earthly rament and place me deep in my mother's earth, and place me with care upon my mother's breast. Cover me with soft earth, and let each handful be mixed with seeds of jasmine, lilies, and myrtle. And when they grow above me and thrive on my body's element, they will breathe the fragrance of my heart into space, and reveal even to the sun the secret of my peace, and sail with the breeze and comfort the wayfarer. Welcome, everybody. Hi, my name is Tom Phillips, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. We welcome all with a warm heart and an open mind, whatever your religious background or lack thereof, whatever your job or your past, whatever your race, gender, or age, whether you're gay, straight, bi, or queer, and whether you're able-bodied or differently abled, you're welcome here. With this, I extend a warm welcome to our visitors and guests. We invite you to sign our guest book at the welcome table in the narthex. And on that form, you can request a complimentary subscription to our newsletter. Our greeters and I will be available after the service to answer any questions you may have. Okay. This is the time in our service when we acknowledge the land upon which we gather. Today, as we consider how to nurture beauty through honoring the dead, we remember that the bones and stories of our indigenous ancestors are a part of the soil we now call home here in Kansas. Unfortunately, we do not know many of their stories, but we join with others in learning them. As one example, we lift up archaeological and geological research being done in Shawnee County in conversation with the citizen Potawatomi Nation to understand the burial ground in Uniontown, a site of rich historical interest. Apparently Uniontown was, and to some extent still is, at the star on the left. We affirm the commitment of the archaeologist Blair Schneider of the Kansas Geological Survey, who roots her work in restorative justice and credits her findings to relationships with local indigenous leaders and others who share their stories and historical knowledge passed down for generations. With Blair Schneider, we commit to learning history in order to be of service to the descendants of this land. She says, "This isn't about me, this is about your history, and I just want to be able to help contribute." And now for the lighting the chalice, I'd like to invite Larry Weaver to light a match. And I will read the words of Suzelle Lynch from the First UU Church of Brooks County in Reading, Pennsylvania. Our community is filled with beauty. When you open the door to greet me, that's where the beauty begins. When you share with me that's important to you, beauty is there as I listen. When we join hands to practice compassion, beauty's heart blooms like a flower. When we teach or learn or work for justice, beauty abounds, sparks, joy in all. Let's light this chalice, as Larry has just done, for beauty now, the beauty we seek, the beauty we share, and the beauty we nurture together. And now we have some special music by our visitor, Sarah Cruz, accompanied by Tim, or with the song titled "For All This."
Hi, good morning. It's nice to be here. I'm getting it with all my being. I'm seeing you with all my eyes. I'm touching you with all my fingers, and I'm feeling this in all my bones. I'm waking up with all my senses. I'm hanging on with all my strength. I'm heading out with all my courage. And I'm coming home with all my faith. And I'll go where the Spirit will take me. I'll sing to you, beautiful child. I'll dance to the song of your laughter. For all this, I am grateful for life. And I'll carry on in all this madness. I'm moving toward the mystery. And I come undone by all this sadness. And I'm asking you to walk with me. I'm breathing right into my center. I marvel at the stars above. I'm mystified by all this magic. And I'm reveling in all your love. And I'll go where the Spirit will take me. I'll sing to you, beautiful child. I'll dance to the song of your laughter. For all this, I am grateful for life. For all this, I am grateful for life.
Very nice, Sarah and Tim. Thank you so much. Now we've come to time for all ages, and I call all children and adults of all ages to please join me up front here to participate. And you can do this either from your seats or at home as you watch the video of the story. It's a different title this time, a video titled, I Miss You, a story of losing a loved one who has died. We're just going to watch together. This is not here. Okay.
I Miss You, A First Look at Death. Written by Pat Thomas, illustrated by Leslie Harker. Every day someone is born, and every day someone dies. Death is a natural part of life. All living things grow, change, and eventually die. When someone dies, their body stops working. They stop breathing and their heart stops beating. They can't think or feel anymore. They don't eat or sleep. In books and in movies, it is usually bad people who die. But in real life, good people die too. People die for different reasons. Some people die because they are old. Some people get very sick and then they die. Some people die because something unexpected and tragic happened to them. After a person dies, there is usually a ceremony called a funeral. At the funeral, people who knew that person can gather together to say goodbye. They may bring flowers, tell stories, or recite poems. It can be hard to say goodbye to someone you love. It is normal to miss them very much. When someone dies, especially if the death is sudden, it is normal to think of things you wish you had said or things you wish you had not said. You may wish you had been nicer or more helpful, but the way you behaved did not make that person die. Try to remind yourself that he or she died loving you for who you were, not for the things you did or said. When someone you love dies, it can feel as if your heart has been torn in two. It can feel as if part of you is missing. These feelings can take a long time to get over. You may feel lots of different sad feelings before you finally begin to feel like yourself again. When someone you love dies, it can be hard to do all the normal things you did before. You may not feel like seeing your friends or joining in groups. You may feel very alone. Other people may find it hard to talk to you. This is not because they don't care, but because they don't know what to say or do to help you. There's a lot we don't know about death. Every culture has different beliefs about what happens after a person dies. But most cultures also share some beliefs, like the idea that when a person dies, their soul, the part of them that made them special, takes a journey to join the souls of other people who have passed away. It's not an easy idea to understand. Sometimes it helps if you think of the soul as a single raindrop joining a great big ocean. Even after someone you know or love dies, life goes on. The things you learn from that person stay inside of you and become a part of you. As time goes on, you will realize that no one is completely gone as long as you can remember the one you love.
So that gives us things to think about. Has anyone ever known someone who passed away recently? No? Yeah? Do you remember who that was?
It was one of my pets.
Uh-huh. Was it a dog or a cat?
Yeah, it was a cat.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's one thing.
She died because she was really old.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Yeah, that'll happen. And you know, they don't live as long as we do, right? Yeah, I had two large dogs that died in like 8 years or so. Yeah, and if we've lived long enough, we have lots of pets. And we're sad after that, right? I mean, you missed your pet. But many times that will change to where we remember that person or that pet, and we're filled with joy and with some good thoughts because we remember how much fun we had, right? Yeah, I remember I used to take Will for a walk, and he was really something on walks, But then he got sick and passed away. So there is this cycle of life also, like they said in the story. Every day there's a lot of people who are born, and every day older people pass away. And it's the same for our dogs and cats. It's the same for our trees, I mean, I love coming back to places after seeing a tree that's been planted when I was your age, and then see how old it is later on. Okay, well, it's something to think about for sure, and there is this cycle in our life. Anybody else want to share about someone? Yeah?
I had a dog named Shadow, and he died.
And do you remember what color Shadow was?
I think he was black.
And did you like playing with Shadow? Was he a nice dog?
I don't remember.
But your family, probably your older brother, Shadow was good? Yeah, okay. All right, well, with that, let's, by our normal way of doing things, let's sing the children out to Ari with the standard song. Go in love, our hearts go with you. Go in joy, our hopes go too. Learn in love and grow in wisdom. Shine your light in all you do. Go in love, our hearts go with you. Go in joy, our hopes go too. Learn in love and grow in wisdom. Shine your light in all you do. Okay. Here at UUFM, the offering we receive on Sunday mornings goes to a special organization each month. This month, our Helping Hands recipient is the Boys and Girls Club of Manhattan. You can donate online by going to the uufm.net site, then clicking the donate link and choosing the particular fund to which you want to contribute. If you're here in person, you can put your offering in the basket at the back of the sanctuary. Now, I'd like to invite also all of you to share your joys and concerns, joys and sorrows for this week. You can write those on a piece of paper you should find somewhere close to your chair, either under the chair in front of you or next door. And if you're on Zoom, certainly you can write your joy or sorrow in the chat, and Sarah D. will read that to us afterwards. And if you're here in the sanctuary and you write it on a little piece of paper, we'll go around and collect that after the musical piece. And we're very happy to hear a piano piece that Renee is going to play called Pilgrims on a Long Journey by Chœur de Pirates. Thank you, Renee. So here in person, we had Rob Morrison, who reports that he is happy to report that my mom had to get a biopsy, but it was benign. That's a good thing, right? Yeah. Anybody else have something from here in the congregation? Anybody online, Sarah, who has a joy or concern?
Yes, this one actually, I missed this one last week. Katie Kingery Page has permission to share that
Renee's poem is beautiful.
Laura Lott has
Perhaps
joyfully
Sarah doesn't have
celebrated.
any at this time. Okay, at this point, we have a hymn before we go further. And please stand as you like to sing, or of course sing along at home with hymn number 326, Let All the Beauty We Have Known. Please be seated. Okay, before we hear from our speaker, I will read from a poem, And Will Adorn His Body. Don't take him away with shining shoes of strangers to a somber black display. Leave him, and we'll adorn his body. Let the musicians come. Sit among the flowers, candles, the voice that remains in the room. Let the ones he found so hard to leave linger in exalted calm as winter mist hovers in the garden, while the heron flies close to the chimney, and under the moon birds hush his dripping calligraphy of branches. Wrap him in a saffron shroud and include in the pocket a poem. Lay him in majesty. There is nothing more noble than death. The widow sings a requiem. The door opens and closes as a temple. Villagers arrive with stories and laughter and feasting. Friends with shovels approach the grave, the young doing most of the work, the old digging in a half rhythm for their own transition. And in the downpour, amazing grace to bring him from his worldly house to the place we speculate to be this or that. In the slow largo of descent upon boughs of cedar, white flowers from New York thrown into his arms and across his body, Shakespeare would describe such a gathering in the final act, an assortment of characters close to the mystical bridge. And now we will hear a reflection from our guest speaker today, Sarah Cruz, from the Heartland Prairie Cemetery, and her title is Nurturing Beauty by Reimagining Death.
Thank you. So thank you all so much for inviting me to speak to you today on a subject that we give surprisingly little attention to until it seemingly quite suddenly makes itself known. And that subject, as we know, is death. Having just experienced 2 years of a pandemic that overwhelmed our hospitals and have just reached the grim milestone of 1 million COVID-related deaths, we still have trouble knowing where to begin the conversation when it comes to our own deaths or those closest to us. Incredibly, death has a 100% success rate. Every single one of us in this room right now will someday die, as will everyone we know and love. And yet, it is a conversation we hesitate to approach, and certainly don't necessarily associate with this month's theme here at UUFM, Nurturing Beauty. It is my belief that engaging in honest conversations about death and dying can elevate our society to a greater collective wisdom. Knowing how to support each other when death comes is vital to healthy family systems and communities. It is as normal a part of our everyday lives as birth and breathing. So as it says in the order of service, I'll be presenting on Nurturing Beauty by Reimagining Death. Specifically, I'm here to talk about what we do after a death has happened and help you imagine greater possibilities. Something essential and precious has been hidden away in our culture. That precious thing, tending to our dead, got tucked away, pushed out of our collective consciousness for multiple complex reasons. Among them, I believe, a real desire to protect one another from suffering, to step in and take away what might be perceived as too difficult a task when coping with loss. Modern mobility allowed us to move to distant places and make a life far from our community and families of origin. By professionalizing, monetizing, and medicalizing the tasks of caring for the dead, within just a few generations, we have unintentionally relegated ourselves as paying spectators during one of life's most profound transitions. This practice of tending to our dead is deep in our bones. We have inherited it from our ancestors. I believe that it is part of our genetic memory, part of what makes us truly human. Let's begin by imagining two scenarios. Marcia is caring for her brother who is dying from Parkinson's disease. The hospice team is providing help in the home, and together they are assuring that he is clean and comfortable. Marcia is sitting beside her brother in the middle of the night when he takes his last breath. She calls the hospice nurse, who arrives shortly to pronounce him dead and dispose of any leftover medications. The nurse asks what funeral home she'll be using and makes the call to have the body picked up. Within the hour, they have arrived. They ask Marcia to leave the room while they zip her brother's body into a plastic bag and remove him from the home. A couple of hours later, her nephew arrives after driving in the early hours from his job on the railroad to say goodbye to his father. He calls the funeral home, who informs him it isn't possible for him to see his father as they haven't prepared him yet for viewing. Later that morning, Marcia and her nephew go to the funeral home to make arrangements. They choose from the general price list a burial package, which doesn't include a private viewing of the body. So Marcia's nephew is prevented from seeing his father until the scheduled visitation, even though he's right there in the building. Here's the second scenario. Marcia is caring for her 97-year-old mother, Dorothy, in her home. Dorothy is dying of Alzheimer's and basically old age. In the years since her brother's death, Marcia became aware that caring for her mother in her home after she dies is legal in every state, including Kansas. She has shared with the hospice team that she will be keeping her mother's body at home and holding the funeral there. The night that Dorothy dies, Marcia is sleeping beside her in the same room. She awakens to a change in her mother's breathing and gently holds her as she takes her final breath. She knows there is nothing urgent that needs to happen. She lights a candle, says a few prayers, and calls the hospice nurse, who comes over, enters into that quiet space with her, and shares a few memories before leaving. Marcia's sisters arrive early in the morning. They tenderly bathe their mother's body, wash, dry, and style her hair. They select Dorothy's favorite dress and matching jewelry and dress her, sharing some laughs at how awkward it is to dress someone who isn't helping out at all. They put on her favorite lipstick color and paint her fingernails to match. They lift her up and carry her to the screened-in back porch where the coffin their brother purchased several weeks earlier is waiting, and carefully set her in it. They have arranged some frozen ice packs along the sides and covered them with a soft piece of fabric, as cooling the body is a natural and effective way of slowing decomposition. One of them places Dorothy's well-worn Bible next to her and wraps her rosary beads in her hands. The following day, friends and family, including all of Dorothy's great-grandchildren, are filling the porch with conversation, tears, and laughter. There are platters of food in the kitchen, drinks available, bouquets of flowers, family photos arranged on the tables, draped with beautiful quilts skillfully made by Dorothy. The priest from their church comes and leads the group in service, prayers, and song, blessing Dorothy, who looks truly beautiful in her open casket. The next day, with the help of family and friends, they place the coffin in the back of her son's classic old truck and drive her to the cemetery in Milton Vale, where she will be laid to rest beside her husband. Which one of these scenarios do you suppose helped the family to feel more connected to each other and to the reality of the loss of this precious family member? While you were imagining them, which one held a little bit more beauty? My husband Tim and I founded Heartland Prairie Cemetery, which has the inaccurate distinction of being called Kansas's first all-natural or green cemetery. The reason that I say this is an inaccurate distinction is because for many years, this practice of placing a body directly in the ground, either wrapped in a shroud or an easily biodegradable plain wooden box, was simply called burial. Granted, our ancestors were not burying their loved ones with a mind toward environmental impact or with the intention of land conservation and restoration. So I suppose in part what we are doing is unique. Rather than having large stone monument markers that identify the place as a cemetery, we are restoring the acreage to native prairie. We keep track of grave locations in several ways: physical measurements of the land, GPS coordinates, and marking each site directly with an engraved metal marker placed flush with the ground. We've also created walking trails throughout the property. We are really reimagining what a cemetery space looks and feels like by creating habitat, open green spaces, a swath of tall grass prairie, including beautiful spring flowers, a place to birdwatch, walk the trails, picnic, or simply sit in quiet contemplation. Joe Seehey, founder of the Green Burial Council, has said, "Nothing connects people to the land like being buried in it." But for too long now, our cemeteries have functioned under a prevailing concept of land as outsider, as other. Green burial cemeteries give us another way of laying claim to a vision of land as community and of restoring our lost relationship to the land. Many of you may be aware of the tremendous amount of resources used in conventional burial. In contrast to that, the aim of a green burial is to return a body to the earth in as simple and direct a way as possible. Therefore, we receive only unembalmed bodies in biodegradable containers. So that can be a plain wooden box or a coffin made from any other natural material, bamboo, wicker, even paper mache, or simply wrapped in a natural fiber shroud, one made from cotton, linen, or silk, for example. Vaults are not used. And while the process of cremation has its own environmental impacts, we do accept cremated remains for burial, again, in a biodegradable container or placed directly in the ground. Land management at Heartland is informed by ecological practices, eliminating the use of pesticides and herbicides. Friends and family can even decide to dig the grave themselves with tools and supervision provided by the cemetery, rather than hire our contracted gravedigger who uses a backhoe for the job. The first family to choose that option made arrangements to have their mother in McPherson buried at Heartland. Tim met the daughters and their uncle out there at the land and provided them with shovels, a digging bar, guidance, and support. A few hours later, they had dug the final resting place for their mom. The next day, they arrived with her shrouded body in the back of a minivan. Having never done it before, the family carefully lowered her in to the hand-dug grave, and all those present participated in filling the grave, which they draped with long stem flowers and flower petals. The average cost of a typical American funeral today is $8,000 to $10,000. But I wonder, how can we quantify the price of what we have traded off as communities, spiritually, emotionally, and environmentally, by outsourcing the care of our dead to a $20 billion a year industry? The real cost is more than the list of buried resources or gallons of fossil fuels burned. Are we familiar with the tasks related to after-death care? Do we have a community around us ready to step in and provide the support we need? Are we more in touch with our capacity to create ritual and ceremony? Is our connection to the natural world more intact? I'm often asked if natural burial is cheaper than a conventional funeral. For the most part, the answer is yes, in that one doesn't need to purchase a vault or pay for other merchandise common to conventional burials. But cemetery costs are always separate from funeral home costs. When using a funeral home, which is what most of us are accustomed to doing, you will, of course, be charged for their services. To be clear, one can hold a home funeral, that is, provide the after-death care at home, and still have a conventional burial, as Dorothy's family did. Or go the familiar route of hiring a funeral director to make all the arrangements with the cemetery and pick up and prepare the body for a natural burial. They will do so by providing refrigeration instead of embalming. More and more funeral homes have green burial products available to sell alongside their fancier caskets. However, if a family chooses to care for the body at home, make the funeral arrangements themselves, including filing the death certificate, which is required by law here in Kansas within 3 days of the death, hand make a shroud or burial box, or order one from a local craftsperson, contact the cemetery and set a date and time for the burial, and then transport the body to the cemetery in their own private vehicle, then absolutely, yes, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper, but it's also going to involve a lot more planning than just picking up the phone. Another important piece of information is that Heartland Prairie Cemetery is just that, a cemetery. I am not a licensed funeral director. I cannot pick up and transport the deceased to the cemetery or file the death certificate. We will prepare the grave and meet the family at the cemetery to support and give instructions as to how they will lower the shrouded and casketed body into the grave themselves. We provide the shovels if the gathered group decides to fill in the grave themselves. Families are invited to create their own rituals and ceremonies at the graveside to do what is meaningful to them. For example, we've had some folks accompanied by their faith leader who leads the gathering in a graveside service grounded in that particular religious tradition. Another family set up a table with refreshments and brought along a boombox to play their mother's favorite songs while they filled in the grave. One family tucked messages into the shroud and completely covered it with flowers. A woman's body arrived in a simple shroud made from the sheets she and her husband had used when they first got together in college. Another family asked the funeral home to give them the top of the cardboard burial container so they could decorate it with drawings of some of their loved ones' favorite things, among them prime numbers, a sailboat, and a game board. An elderly woman was buried wrapped in a quilt made by her mother. A group of friends delivered the body of their artist friend wrapped in a hand-painted canvas shroud in a repurposed and wonderfully painted school bus. They lingered at the graveside and shared a bit of whiskey, pouring some on top of the grave that they had covered themselves. My family lowered my dad into the ground on a cold spring morning in 2020, singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I'll close with another story of a burial that took place earlier this year at Heartland. I got an email from someone named Kelly, whose husband Rick was at home on hospice, asking for a funeral home recommendation in the Kansas City area who could assist them with a natural burial, which I provided her with. However, because I'm committed to letting people know what their choices are outside of the conventional, I also shared with her resources online where she could learn about home-based after-death care, including a podcast I host called A Path Home, where people who have cared for their own deceased loved ones at home had a green burial, or both, share their personal stories. As you might imagine, every story is intimate and unique. Even so, when listening to all of the varied circumstances in these stories, the word that people most frequently use to describe their experience is, you guessed it, beautiful. After finding out what was possible, Kelly and Rick decided this approach really resonated with them, and they were grateful that they had the gift of time while Rick was still feeling relatively good to start making plans. I got a text from Kelly saying, "It has been an amazing way for us to plan a ceremony with intent rather than the typical grief-driven traditional funeral choices." Kelly and Rick, with their family and community of friends, arranged every part of his after-death care themselves. They let the hospice team know about their plans to keep his body at home and asked them to help facilitate initiating the filing of the death certificate. Rick spent his final days in a bed they had moved into the sunroom in their home, so after he died, he remained in that bed. Using simple cooling techniques, including ice packs and opening the windows, they slowed decomposition in the natural way. Kelly was able to get up in the morning and have her coffee there in the room with his body present. She texted saying, "I can't express how good it feels to have him here in the house." She and her sisters wrapped him in a shroud they had ordered prior to his death, while they waited for Rick's son to arrive from California with a handmade coffin he had built. Together, they placed his shrouded body in the box, surrounded him with native plants, seed pods, and berries that a friend had grown. Kelly sent me a photo of her beloved husband beautifully laid out in the sunroom with the words, "This feels like love." 5 days after Rick died, when all the family members had arrived from around the country, they held an evening open house and visitation where they shared stories, music, food, and drink. The following day, they closed the burial box, loaded it into the back of his son's truck, and drove to the cemetery where we had prepared the grave for him. 28 people gathered graveside, sharing heartfelt eulogies and memories. Then Rick's grown children lowered his body into the grave. Having never engaged in the activity of burying a loved one themselves, they completed the task beautifully. Ordinary people invited to participate in an age-old ordinary activity and having nothing short of an extraordinary experience. Rather than going with the norm of picking up the phone and having strangers come in to take away Rick's body shortly after he died, and then wait days until family arrived to attend a service someone else had prepared for them, Kelly was fully and physically engaged in caring for her husband from the moment he died to the actual burial. Kelly had never even considered doing something like this, but she leaned into both her love and her fear and guided her family into that space with her. When I asked Kelly whether I could share her story, she replied, "Yes, please share. I can't tell you how many people have told me that Rick's services were the most beautiful and lasting they have ever experienced." We have been so acculturated to believing that this is probably something better left to the professionals, because unlike our not so distant ancestors, we haven't had the experience of keeping a deceased loved one in our home. Being invited to step closer, to trust our intuition, to let love guide us. And what is grappling with death, with grief, if not directly getting in touch with the love that binds us together? Leaning into the reality of death in this way may in fact help us to carry our grief in a bearable way. Nurturing beauty through reimagining death. Touching a father's body with love and reverence as we bathe and prepare him for cremation. Inviting everyone in the family to decorate the container with art and messages of love and farewell. Picking up shovels and pickaxes to dig a friend's grave. Returning a mother's shrouded body to the earth, lining her final resting place with leaves and flowers, singing and crying together as we fill in the soil. All this within the intimacy of one's own circles of love, in conscious relationship to land and place, and with an awareness and consideration for the greater circles and web of life on this planet. So I'm going to do another original song. Get them set up here. And there's a part for all of you in this. So yeah, there's a nice sing-along bit. All right. The microphone's on now. Okay. So this song is called The Next Step. And the sing-along part is pretty easy, and I think we're going to have the lyrics up there at some point. But it goes like this. Okay, the first line is drop right in as the sun comes up. And it goes like this. Drop right in as the sun comes up. Got it? Let's sing it all, the whole line. Drop right in as the sun comes up. Wow, you guys are good. All right, second line. May this bright new day get the best of us. May this bright new day get the best of us. Let's do that again. May this bright new day get the best of us. Life just asks that we show up. Life just asks that we show up. That's the whole thing. Let's sing that line one more time, and then we're going to put it all together. Life just asks that we show up. Beautiful. All together. Drop right in. Here it comes. Drop right in as the sun comes up. May this bright new day get the best of us. Life just asks that we show up. Beautiful, you got it. So that refrain comes along twice during this song. There's 4 verses that I'll sing, and I'll let you know when the refrain's coming up. Morning in spring, there's a chill outside. Light up the last fire of the season. Get ourselves ready for the coming tide. It's in the not knowing where we reside. Take the next breath, take the next step. There's so much to do. Look at the time. I just want to slow things down and quiet my mind. The babes are all grown in the blink of an eye, and we're getting older without even trying. Take the next breath, take the next step. And here it comes. We're going to drop right in a second. And drop right in as the sun comes up. May this bright new day get the best of us. Life just asks that we show up. Beautiful singing. Today on the news, more of the same. people are suffering and no one's to blame. Another storm's coming, another man with a gun. This world is on fire with nowhere to run. Take the next breath, take the next step. We're gonna drop right in. And drop right in as the sun comes up. May this bright new day get the best of us. Life just asks that we show up. And I want to be there to walk you home. I'll tend to your body, you'll tend to my soul. And if it happens the other way round, I know you'll gently lay me in the ground. And take the next breath, take the next step. Thank you. Ooh. That was really good singing. Through the masks even. I mean, there was a lot of volume in that. Thank you. I'm going to close with this excerpt from D.H. Lawrence from All Souls Day. Be kind. Oh, be kind to your dead and give them a little encouragement and help them to build their little ship of death. Oh, from out of your heart, provide your dead ones once more. Equip them like departing mariners lovingly.
And that ends our service for today. Please stay to visit with Sarah and Tim, and I think there should be coffee available. Thank you.